So, speaking of the audio and protecting your ears, important disclaimer before we start. There will be a few loud, harsh noises at certain points during our panel, just to give you a heads up. Yeah, exactly. Woo! You are more than welcome to step outside whenever you need. We will give you a heads up so you're not caught by surprise, okay? After all, the GBA's noisy audio. It's going to be loud and it's going to be harsh. All right, so, hello. My name is Summer. I am currently an elementary general music teacher in Connecticut and also a hobbyist computer programmer. I'm the author of a high-quality audio hack for a certain GBA game that we will not be revealing yet for suspense. But it's so good to see you all. This is my second MAGFest ever, and alongside me, I have Kuma.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kuma. I have been a long-time Earthbound / Mother fan. Yeah. Let's go Earthbound. Found the game when I was 10, like most of us probably through Super Smash Brothers, and I decided to invoke that love through cosplay. I've cosplayed all 3 of the Mother Girls. You might have seen us walking around, and I made this cosplay that Summer's currently wearing. So yeah, thanks for being here.
All right, so we have a couple goals today. First of all, since I'm a teacher, there will be tests. No, just kidding. We will be learning some of the basics behind audio in computers and video games. I like telling you guys, well, okay, I'm gonna tell you how to hack the game, but like, why are we doing what we're doing? Well, we're gonna explain why. It's gonna be interesting, it's gonna be fun, and it's gonna help you understand the later bits. Then we're gonna learn why most Game Boy Advance games flat out sound bad. Not talking about the quality of their soundtrack, just talking about how fuzzy, how noisy, like how much distortion is in like the actual sound playing out of the console speakers, like when you're playing a game. Learn how to make Game Boy Advance games sound better, and we will be hacking a GBA game live in front of you to make it sound better. So, why hack a Game Boy Advance game? Why go through the effort? Well, I mean, there's a couple of reasons. You're improving the experience of the game for other people. I mean, why not make the game sound like less noisy, especially on modern computers? Because, hey, listen to how loud our speakers are in the room, right? Listen to how loud the Game Boy Advance's, startup screen was in our hall. And now imagine all the noise that you're so used to hearing people talk about being played over these speakers. It's going to be a lot louder than just playing the Game Boy Advance at night in your bed, right? You give your favorite soundtrack a fresh coat of paint. I mean, you can make your favorite music sound so much better. Isn't that rewarding? You have fun experimenting with a game you love. You learn the inner workings of audio in video games. It's a learning opportunity, and you can actually add better support for custom music that other people, say on the internet, can hack into the game. We'll explain why this allows a better experience, like adding your own music into Game Boy Advance games later. But you get to impress your friends, and your mortal enemies will be jealous. All right, so here's the big reveal. What game are we hacking today?
Who knows? What is it?
Did you get chills?
Always.
I always get
Always.
chills when I hear the title screen.
It never gets old.
All right, so Mother 3, Kuma, take it away. Explain why we are hacking Mother 3 today.
So, Mother 3 is like one of my favorite games, and it's Summer's favorite game as well. For some of you who may not know what Mother 3 is, it is the last and final game in the Mother series created by Shigesato Itoi. With Mother 3, the most popular thing about it is the fact that it was never translated officially by Nintendo in English, but the wonderful fans such as a guy named Tomato, he did the official fan translation. So just to give a quick synopsis of the game, basically it stars a coddled and timid boy, Lucas, and basically he's just going through all of these the changes that is happening throughout his life, and without spoiling too much, he goes through a lot of tragedies, and basically how he goes through that trauma and how he deals with it, and how he technically pretty much saves the world around him. So, and it's not only him that you see like how the world affects him, but also characters that are his friends, his family, his village people, and it's a wonderful game, and it's very emotional. I think everybody knows how quirky Earthbound is. It's funny, haha, fuzzy pickles, so silly. But Mother 3, it's like that too, but it's more emotional, it's more sad, it's more tragic, and the music helps to invoke that type of emotion that it has. It really adds to the story and adds to the feelings that you feel with certain things that happen. So yeah, that's the synopsis of the game.
Love it. Thank you so much, Kuma. And yeah, I mean, the music in Mother 3 is absolutely, genuinely amazing. I mean, I actually belong to a local video game orchestra around where I live, and some of my friends from there are here today, and I actually arranged some of Mother 3's music, and we kind of performed it in dedication to Shoko Sakai, the composer of Mother 3, actually retiring from HAL Laboratory. He no longer works there, but he still does freelance work, including, well, Kirby Air Riders. How about that?
Shout out NGSO.
So, we're going to get a bit more into the weeds, but I thought that it would be neat to show you guys what the final product is going to sound like. What our hack is going to do to Mother 3, and hope you enjoy, because the difference is, it's amazing. Hope you enjoyed. And just starting out, for those of you who may maybe not be familiar with the Game Boy Advance, or maybe like you played like an actual GBA when you were a kid, but you haven't played it in a while, or you haven't played games on your computer, just see if you can try to take notice of when it was saying old mixer, all that fuzz, all that hissing in the background, and then listen to how much of it is cut out when you saw the text new mixer. So how did we do that? Well, let's start out by explaining the basics of sound in computers and video games. Just a heads up, some of you may be audio experts in here, and just know that this is the basics. This is the basics. If you want to come and chastise me for oversimplifying after the panel, don't bite. Just don't make it hurt. But feel free to. All right. But anyways, the basics of sound. What is sound? Okay, sound is basically vibrations that travel through spaces filled with stuff, like air or water, right? When I'm talking to you, my vocal cords, they're vibrating, and those vibrations actually just go throughout the room, and your ears pick them up. Sound waves create pressure on the air, pushing and pulling on it around you, almost like a tug of war. The faster a sound vibrates, the higher its pitch, and the higher the pressure of the sound, the stronger it is, the louder it will sound. What does that look like? Have you ever wondered what sound, quote unquote, looks like? Well, imagine if you could see particles in the air. Could look something like that. Do you notice how some of those dots are kind of traveling to the right, but then some dots are actually kind of pulling back? Almost like a ripple in a pond. It goes out and then comes back in. The water goes up and then goes down. So that's one visualization of how sound works. Another, you're probably more used to this, is the up and down wave, right? Hills and valleys. Makes sense? Let's put them together for science. Sound looks something like that. And try to see if that kind of almost makes intuitive sense based on just like the basic idea of sound, like, oh, it's vibrations. It's going in and out and in and out, right? Okay, so how do we hear sounds? Well, very simple. I won't give you the rundown of acoustics from my intro to psychology class in college. So our ears and brain turn those vibrations into electricity. Sound goes through your ear canal, and your eardrum actually vibrates along with the sound wave. There are small bones in your ear that vibrate with the eardrum, and it actually kind of basically vibrates this kind of shell in our ear called a cochlea and stimulates nerves in our hearing system. And those nerves send out electrical impulses to our brain. What else turns sound into electricity? Well, what am I talking to you with right now? A microphone, right? A microphone is very similar to how your ear works. There's a diaphragm in here that is vibrating with the vibrations from my voice, and it's sending electricity through the mixer, right? So there are different ways of recording audio and sound. Microphones and speakers use electricity to record and play audio, right? Audio cassettes, if you remember them, use magnetic tape. Vinyl records have physical grooves etched into them. Okay, all three of these methods are meant to mirror the shape of sound waves, right? Like if you were to visualize how a microphone works the same way we just visualize how sound works, well, okay, when I'm talking into the mic, the louder the sound, the more electricity is going through the wire, right? Pretty simple one-to-one connection, right? That is what we call analog audio. Recordings that directly mimic the smooth curves of a sound wave. In other words, the electricity in the mic going up and down with the sound wave going up and down, they're analogous. That's where that word comes from. Analog audio is analogous to, say, electricity, physical grooves in a record, or magnetic tape in a cassette. But is that how computers store sound? Not exactly. Computers handle audio a bit differently. So instead of, imagine analog audio is like kind of like tracing a sound wave shape with a pencil, right? If you remember in math class, like if say you took pre-calculus or calculus, this idea of continuity, oh, okay, can I trace this curve with my pencil without picking up my pencil off the paper, right? There's no holes, there's no gaps, it's just one smooth curve, right? That's analog audio. Instead of that, let's play a game of connect the dots. Digital audio is how computers and video games handle sound. So what does digital mean? It's actually very simple. Recordings that break down sound into a bunch of numbers. Digital, all digits, which looks something like this. Now, some of you might know what's going on, others might not. That's okay. Let's dig in a little bit deeper. What do all these dots on this sound wave mean? Well, let's try an example. Take an analog sound, like what we hear with our ears, what the microphone is dealing with, and make it digital, right? Okay, so step one, let's say we're gonna draw the shape of our audio recording, right? We're gonna draw the shape of the sound wave, it going in and out. Like the pressure is up here, it's down here, how fast it's vibrating, how high-pitched or low-pitched it is. Take this shape, for example, right? Make sense? Step two, here's where the dots come in. We're gonna do something called sampling. Sampling is when you basically draw dots on top of the sound wave and measure their height, right? You're, in some sense, tracing the shape of the sound wave with numbers. You see where this is going? We're taking samples, dots, we're sampling the wave. And then we're gonna quantize it. Now that's a big word. What does that even mean? Quantizing is actually pretty simple. It essentially is just a fancy word for rounding, right? Like in math class, right? Round 3.67 to the nearest tenth. Exactly, right? So, quantizing, round those dots on the sound wave, those dots' height, what we measured, to the nearest, metaphorical language, line on a ruler, right? Imagine if we're measuring how high up the sound wave is at any given time with a ruler, round it to like the nearest. This is not how, we don't use inches and centimeters with digital sound, but imagine rounding it to the nearest inch or centimeter, right? Does that kind of make sense? So you see how kind of, if we go back, dots are perfectly on the shape of the sound wave, but then when we quantize, see how they moved a little bit, right? You now have a snapshot of that sound you can save to your hard drive, because you know what those dots are? They're just numbers. You've taken like a sample, a buffet from the sound wave, broken it into tiny bits and pieces, into numbers, and you can save those numbers to a file like an MP3 or a wave, right? But what if you want to listen back to it? Take a digital sound and make it analog. How do you do that? You connect the dots. Does it make sense? Yeah. All right, cool. So let's dig further into the weeds. There are two aspects of digital audio that we're going to focus on today, and if you can guess, they have to do with why Game Boy Advance games don't sound so hot. So, sample rates. What is a sample rate? Well, we just talked about sampling a sound wave, right? We just talked about measuring, okay, just take a couple of numbers that describe the shape of the sound wave here, here, there, and wherever. But how many samples should you take? How many dots should you draw on a sound wave to accurately capture its shape, to take like a photo of it almost? Well, a sample rate is how many dots per second are you drawing and measuring on the sound wave. Dots being samples, right? So, faster sample rates, they help make music sound clearer because you're recording more detail about what you're hearing, right? You're getting an accurate description of the music. And they allow you to record high-pitched sounds because, remember, what is a high-pitched sound? It's a sound that's vibrating very fast, many times per second. How do we capture fast vibrations? With fast sample rates, right? So if you think about it in the opposite direction, if you decide I'm not going to take a lot of samples of the sound wave, I'm going to record at low quality for whatever reason, well, you're going to get tin can audio quality. It's going to sound like an old radio. Not only that, you actually create issues with high-pitched sounds. This is what we call aliasing. Aliasing is the phenomenon when the shape of whatever original sound wave you were recording, like a piece of music, what have you, the shape of that music doesn't match the shape of the digital recording you made, the samples we drew on the wave. How can that happen? I'll show you in a second. But basically, to put into words, if a sample rate isn't fast enough for like a sound wave that's really, really, really high pitched, you might start hearing wrong notes being played. What does that look like? Well, imagine we had the red sound wave in that picture, right? Imagine that's like the original music. And then look at the dots that we're drawing on that sound wave to kind of take a screenshot of it, right? Look at how few dots there are compared to how many times the wave is going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. What happens when you connect those dots? Well, look at the blue wave. That's our digital recording. Does that shape match the red sound wave at all? It's completely different, right? It's going to sound like a different note. For example, a couple years ago, I was helping some people out with a sound restoration project for Mother 1 and 2 on the Game Boy Advance, and that was my first foray into like GBA audio and how it works. And well, one of my tasks was to take Battle against a weak opponent, and try to get it working with Mother 1 and 2. And I got some really funky results. Turns out that was aliasing. Let me show you. This is the original, the Super Nintendo version. No aliasing at all. Isn't that such a fun track? Are you ready to ruin it? Here's basically what it sounded like when I put that into Mother 1 and 2. Listen very closely here. So what do you immediately notice? You might immediately notice it sounds a lot tinnier. It sounds like it's being played through like an old radio, like almost like under a tunnel. And then you get to like halfway through the song, and those funky like sliding synths, those are wrong notes being played because the sample rate is not high enough. The sample rate is taking an inaccurate picture of the sound wave. And you can actually hear that. Wild, right? How do you fix aliasing? Simple. You turn up the sample rate. But of course, there's even worse to come out of the Game Boy Advance. Mother 1 and 2, and we'll provide more context for this later, but just for now, Mother 1 and 2, sample rate is 10.5 kilohertz. Now, anyone who knows anything about audio, like say CD quality audio, that is horrendous. There is even worse on the Game Boy Advance. I present to you this 2004 title I found. I've never played it, Advanced Guardian Heroes. It's surprisingly even worse. I'm gonna lower the volume because this is a little bit hard to listen to. So fair warning.
Respectfully.
Are we underwater or something? This game's sample rate, and like I said, we'll provide more context, but this sample rate is an absolutely atrocious 7,884 hertz, 7.884 kilohertz. Anyone who is not experienced or like isn't into like computer audio or digital audio, I'm about to provide you a hilarious example. Turns out Advanced Guardian Heroes has worse audio quality than a very, very old educational device. (1978) Speak and Spell.
Say it. Welcome. Say it. Play. Say it. Finger.
Want to know what that sample rate is? 8,000. Same sample rate of old telephones, actually. I had no idea that this was a thing until I started doing this panel, and I wanted to quit life. 7,884 compared to 8,000. 1978 versus 2004. Oh dear. So, that context from earlier. Let me give you some examples of common sample rates and also video game sample rates that will put things into further context. So, if you decide to go home to your hotel after attending some lovely panels today and you just want to watch a movie, you have a DVD. A DVD quality audio is 48 kilohertz. CD quality audio, probably the most well-known sample rate, I would say, in mainstream culture, is 44.1 kilohertz. The sample rate that you need in order to record music where you actually are covering the full range of human hearing has to be over 40 kilohertz, over 40,000 hertz. Once you have a sample rate of over 40 kilohertz, then whatever music you are recording, none of the sounds will be missed. Anyone can hear all of those sounds. Super Nintendo quality audio is pretty respectable for 1991. It's 32 kilohertz. Is it it's not quite CD quality audio, but it's pretty decent. Early MP3 files and AM radio, about 22 kilohertz. So yeah, that 7.884 is looking pretty nice there, isn't it? Mother 3 has a slightly above average sample rate of 15.8 kilohertz. The default for most GBA games is 13.4. These numbers might look a little bit weird. They are. We'll explain why later. Again, Mother 1 and 2, 10.5. Old phones, Speak and Spell, 8, and poor Advanced Guardian Heroes. What I find most hilarious, though, is even with such a horrendous audio quality, that game still manages to lag if you play it on emulators. So, now the other side of the coin, bit depth. What is bit depth? Well, bit depth is how precisely you're measuring the height of those samples. Remember we were talking about rounding quantization, right? Like, if you're looking at a ruler, you're looking at the lines of a ruler, and you're like, okay, well, this wave is up here. Here's this dot, here's the sample, and I have my ruler. Okay, what's the closest line on the ruler that dot is? Okay, we're going to move it down here, right? Well, you can get more precise than inches, right? Centimeters are more precise than inches, right? You can get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. That's basically what bit depth is. Higher bit depths help music sound less noisy and less distorted. See where we're going? And they also allow you to record very quiet sounds, right? Because if the sound is down here on the ruler, if it's really precise, it's like, oh, okay, here's where the sound is. But imagine if there are huge steps between the lines on the ruler. Imagine if a sound is here. Well, you're either going to bump it all the way up here, or, turns out, you're going to make it silent. Low bit depths actually cancel out quiet sounds in audio recordings. Not only that, they distort music very badly and add a lot of what we call quantization noise. Quantization noise is the audible fuzz you get from rounding samples in digital audio. The lower the bit depth of an audio recording, the less accurate your sound will be compared to the original, because you're rounding the shape of the sound wave. You're smearing over those tiny details in the recording. And if you don't, like, cut out very quiet sounds, if you're not rounding them down, well, you're rounding them up. You're making what should have been quiet parts of song or a mix tape much louder than they were supposed to be. What that looks like is something like this. The red sound wave is the original. If you look at the kind of like the almost like the staircase pattern, like the black lines, that's what happens when you round the samples, the snapshots you're taking of the shape of the sound wave, to the lines on your ruler. And if you look in the middle, that weird looking green curve, well, those are the bits of the sound wave that you threw out from rounding. If you look at 90, like in like time, if you like follow the shape of the sound wave, if you follow it up to, oh, my bad. If you follow it up to its, like, where it gets the hill, look at like the straight line, the straight black line, and then look at the red curve above it, and then look down to the green curve. That's the red curve missing. We just threw out that part of the music because we rounded it too much. And quantization noise really sucks. It's not the same as white noise. White noise is random. It's in the background. Quantization noise is not in the background. Quantization noise is part of the music. It's the music that's been distorted, right? It's harsh to the ears, and it's not that easy to ignore. Thankfully, Generally speaking, not much of a problem with modern computers and video games, but there are some video games, popular examples, where you've heard quantization noise before. Who's played Pokemon Yellow before? Okay, for those of you who haven't, I'm going to turn volume down. This is harsh. I'm warning you, this is harsh. Pretty okay so far, right? What was that? What was that? What just assaulted my ears right now? Well, guess what that was?
Every single bit.
That is my mortal nemesis. Quantization noise. Pokemon Yellow. Pokemon Yellow's voice samples of Pikachu, yeah, they're 1-bit audio. What does that mean? Well, let's make our own example of taking modern video game, say, voice lines, and bit crunching them to oblivion. So let's take Pikachu's cry from Sword and Shield, right? Pikachu. Let me turn that up just a little bit. Pikachu. Right? That's full quality, sounds great, sounds fine, right? Okay, now imagine you compress that to 14-bit depth. Pikachu! Okay, not much of a difference so far. Let's see if we can listen to just like the lingering noise that came from rounding down. And let's see if we can pick up anything. I can't hear anything. It's not there. 14-bit audio is pretty decent quality. Okay, let's go down a little further. Pikachu! That's 12-bit audio. Was there any noise there? Pikachu! I'm having trouble hearing the noise. Can you turn it up some more, please? Sure thing. Pikachu! Even playing that noise clip, I still can't hear much. So far, so good. Even though we've compressed the quality, not noticeable, right? 10-bit audio is actually the quality of the Nintendo DS. Let's see how that fares. Pikachu! Was there any noise there? Let's see. Very faint noise. I'm gonna turn it up. Did you hear that? Very faint, but it's there. Okay. Now, here's where things get worse. Pikachu! Let me turn that up. Yep. Pikachu! Did you hear something in the background? Pikachu! Yeah, listen to the isolated noise. That's quantization noise. 6-bit is even worse. Pikachu! You heard that, right? I don't know why this is not playing. Hold on 1 second. Try that again. 6-bit noise, right? Let's make it even worse. 4-bit. Now here's where you really start to notice quiet sounds being just thrown out because we're being so imprecise. Right? What's the noise there? Very harsh. 3-bit. Like he's being cut off or something, right? Really harsh. And now, finally, let's make our own Pokemon Yellow soundbite. That's pretty bad, right? Yeah, that's quantization noise. Really, really bad. So let's look at examples of bit depths in digital audio. Highest setting for professional audio mixing, for those of you who have ever used Audacity before, this is the default 32 bits. Basically, virtually, you will never hear any noise coming out of 32-bit audio. Our ears are not sensitive enough. And our ears are very sensitive, but that's just like audiophile quality, right? Okay, you go a little bit lower, still very useful for professional audio mixing, 24 bits. It's fine. CD quality audio and Super Nintendo quality audio, look at that, 16 bits. Perfect. 16-bit audio is a like gold standard for so much. Like if you are using 16 bits, you're golden. Okay. Then Nintendo DS is at 10 bits. That's when you start to hear a little bit of noise. If the next time you're playing a Nintendo DS game, put the speakers up to your ears, see if you can make out very faint distortion. And then the Game Boy Advance is 8-bit audio. Now, that alone is not necessarily that noisy. There's an even worse problem coming up soon. But let's take a really quick detour and talk about how can we hear multiple sounds coming out of a computer at once? That question I thought about a lot as a kid. Like, okay, if I'm hearing like one person talk, right? That's a sound wave and it's kind of bumping up against my eardrum. But what about another person talking? How do those cancel out? Like, how can you hear two different vibrations at once? How can a speaker play, say, both my voice and Kuma's voice? Doesn't it like have to stop vibrating for my voice and vibrate for their voice? Well, turns out that sound waves add up. Sound waves mix together in the air. If you're playing two loud sounds at once, you're going to get a very, very, very loud combined sound, right? Mixed together. Some sounds even cancel each other out. And that's the job of audio mixers, mixing consoles. Who has acted in high school musicals or high school plays before? And maybe, who's been in tech before? Right? Have people seen the audio mixer at their high school, maybe college, right? The purpose of those devices, like this one right here, is we have a bunch of different mics up here. How can we send the sound from 4 mics out to 1 speaker? Just add up all of their sound waves together. That's what this is doing. How do you add sound waves? It's actually really simple. Look at the right. Look at that animation. Look at when those blue and green waves kind of overlap each other. Look at how much taller the red wave gets, right? They're adding on top of each other. And then look at when the green and blue waves are opposites of each other. They cancel each other out, right? If we're both talking at the same time, it's going to be much louder than just me talking because the sound is mixing together. So let's look at a pretty good example of hardware audio mixing in video games, right? Basically, what this is, we find it in the Super Nintendo. Rodrigo Copetti actually wrote a great analysis on his website of the Super Nintendo's audio, but like it's very famous for having very clean, high quality music, right? Not quite CD quality audio, but still awfully close. Like 32 kilohertz, 16-bit, that's pretty good. Fun fact, it was made by soon-to-be rival Sony. That's an interesting story right there. Designed specifically by the father of the PlayStation. Okay, but then we have the Game Boy Advance. Okay, surely Nintendo put some kind of hardware mixing in the GBA, right? I mean, they put it in the Super Nintendo. Surely they'll put it in a more recent console that has a more powerful processor, right? 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 Sounds expensive. Yeah. Certainly not helped by a very cheap 8-bit DAC and a quiet mono speaker. Now pause for a second. What does DAC mean? Very nicely done, audience. Gold star for you. I'm gonna throw a pizza party for class next week because you all are such great listeners. Anyways, for those of you who don't know, the audience answered this correctly. DAC, digital to analog converter. Remember when we were looking at digital audio and it's like, okay, how do you take digital audio, like music saved on your hard drive, and turn it into something you can hear? You connect the dots, right? That's basically what a digital to analog converter does. It's a chip in a computer that takes all the ones and zeros of your saved MP3s on your hard drive and sends them out to your speakers. Make sense? Unfortunately, the chip that basically is the final step of playing music in the Game Boy Advance, the DAC, is really, really bad. And the speaker on the Game Boy Advance, I'm sure some of you know, is extremely quiet. And it's not stereo audio. It's not like headphones. It's not left and right. It's just one speaker on the right. And it's awful. You can even hear electrical whining with Game Boy Advance games if you listen very, very closely. Okay. And also, remember, this is pre-iPhone era. The SP, the GBA SP, didn't even have a headphone jack. I rest my case. Okay, so already we know we're not at CD quality audio thanks to that DAC, because by definition, CD quality audio is 16-bit resolution, 16-bit depth. The Game Boy Advance, just because of this one cheap chip that is the final step to actually playing music through the speakers. Even if the Game Boy Advance's audio hardware was like the best in the world, just because it has this one cheap chip in it, it automatically downgrades the entire audio part of the Game Boy Advance. It's a bottleneck, right? It's bad. It's 8-bit audio. Okay, so surely Nintendo put some good audio hardware in here, right? You hear about it all the time. I heard all the time growing up. I'm like, oh, you know, people are like, oh, well, the GBA's sound chip is not very good, right? It's like, okay, interesting. I never heard which sound chip the Game Boy Advance has in it. No one ever mentioned that. So pop quiz. What audio processor did Nintendo put in the GBA? Is it A, the Sony SPC 700? Is it B, the Yamaha YM2612? Is it C, the Texas Instruments SN76489? Or is it D, the Moss Technology 6581? Raise your hand if it's A. If you think it's A. Raise your hand if you think it's B. Raise your hand if you think it's C. Okay, interesting. Raise your hand if you think it's D. All right, the correct answer is you're all wrong. You are all wrong. There is no audio chip in the Game Boy Advance. I'm going to repeat myself. There is no hardware mixer. There is no audio chip in the Game Boy Advance. It has nothing. The only thing it has is the old Game Boy and Game Boy Color sound chip, but like, yay. But why not? Okay, why would Nintendo not put an audio chip in the Game Boy Advance? Most immediate thought, it's cheaper. Yes, it is cheaper. I mean, you're talking about a device that does not have a backlit screen. It is a little bit more complicated because if you think about it, if you look into the hardware behind the Game Boy Advance, its processor is actually pretty decent. Its processor is decently fast, so they put a lot of money into like the main brain behind the Game Boy Advance. So yes, they cut corners besides like the main CPU, but also I was having a conversation a few years ago with developer of what I would say is the best GBA emulator out there, MGBA, Ndrift. Yeah, absolutely. Round of applause for her. Basically, people were talking in her MGBA Discord about, back then, it wasn't as much of a cultural thing to listen to video games with headphones on. Remember, this was back in 2001, right? And I don't, that I was like 1 or 2 years old back then, right? So I didn't have a reference, but I'm thinking, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like it's, like, okay, sure, you had like, say, headphones for Walkman, but not necessarily video games, especially portable video games, right? I mean, kind of new, like new devices, right? And also, let's be real, they already cut costs with other parts of the Game Boy Advance, and the speaker is so bad that what would it matter if they put a really good audio chip in the Game Boy Advance? You can barely hear the music of the games you're playing. You can barely see the games. Okay, so then, wait a second. Time out. In order to play multiple sounds, multiple like pieces of music and instruments at once, we need to have a mixer, right? We need to have a mixer. So without a hardware mixer, how do we play multiple sounds at once? Anyone have a guess?
Software.
Yes.
They have to use CPU power from the main CPU.
Exactly. Software mixing. Instead of having a hardware chip, instead of having a processor, you use the main brain, you use code. You can write audio mixing in code. So, why is that significant? Well, let's look a little bit at the hardware in the Game Boy Advance. Okay, so it has the old Game Boy Color chip in it, right? And it has its own new processor for Game Boy Advance games. 16.78 megahertz clocked ARM7 TDMI. You don't need to necessarily know what that means, but that's a pretty decent chip in a portable system back then, right? Okay, and then how much, say, memory does it have? How much space does it have to do extra work, to do video, all those fun shenanigans? Well, it has 2 chips of memory on board. It has a very small one, 32 kilobytes right on the processor, just a little tiny piece of memory right on the brain. And then it has an external memory chip that's quite a bit bigger, 256 kilobytes. But of course, nowadays you can't store even one photo from your smartphone on that. So, so basically, okay, how are we gonna mix audio like at high quality? Well, we need some software, don't we? Okay, so the Game Boy Advance is kind of limited in a lot of senses. So Nintendo would send out to developers a like a sound driver, right? Code that helps process and mix audio for the game. Other companies sometimes made their own audio mixing code, but Nintendo gave out what we call the Music Player 2000, or as fans refer to, SAPI, to developers, right? And, well, there's some interesting quirks with SAPI. It's not necessarily the worst code in the world, but here's the thing. Every individual instrument in a piece of music being played on the Game Boy Advance is mixed at 8-bit quality. Wait a second. Individual instruments, not just the whole song. Every individual instrument is mixed at 8-bit noise. Wait a second. What happens when you stack noise on top of noise on top of noise on top of noise on top of noise? Well, imagine you took a JPEG. Imagine you took a JPEG of, I don't know, a cute little cat, right? Cat on the couch, right? Save that as a JPEG once. Not too much difference. Like, go back and forth, you might notice subtle differences. But then let's say we save it 10 times. Ooh. Noise is starting to stack on top of other noise, right? Let's save it 20 times. Ooh. This poor cat. Let's save it 30 times. 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100.
Poor Lucky.
See where we're going? Oh, that's as far as I went. I didn't want to hurt the cat anymore. So why such low quality audio mixing with like Nintendo's like kind of like default audio driver? Well, you heard the size of that memory. Can't even fit a cell phone photo on it, right? It's limited. So the code is not necessarily bad. It's just small, compact, and doesn't take up a lot of space. But it leads to really bad audio quality. So let's brainstorm creative ways to make things better. What could we do? Anyone have any ideas? Yes.
Design your samples in a way that works well for the sound engine.
Yeah, you could do that. You know what? Actually, Mother 3 does do that quite a bit. That's a good thought. It's not exactly what I was thinking of, but that's a good idea. Yes. Create your own driver. What would you do differently? What would you do differently with your own driver?
Mix the music down and then.
Aha! Mix it higher quality and then compress it. Very interesting idea. You want to know who else had that idea? Camelot Software Planning, the developers of Golden Sun. Who loves Golden Sun in here? Turns out Golden Sun is awesome. It is programming wizardry. And one of the amazing things that Golden Sun did was they wrote their own audio mixing code that mixes the instruments in the music at 16-bit audio, and then once everything is ready, only one time does it compress it down to 8-bit audio. Instead of 8-bit, 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 noise on top of noise on top of noise, 16-bit, 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 and now that we're all done, 8-bit. So much better. And it turns out that Golden Sun's better sound mixing code is compatible with Mother 3's sound engine. And guess what audio driver Mother 3 uses? The same audio driver that the GBA Pokemon games use, Music Player 2000, which is what if I recall correctly, around 60% of Game Boy Advance games use. How about that? Fantastic. All right, so the next 30 minutes of the panel is going to be taking Golden Sun's magic and stuffing it into Mother 3 and seeing if we can get it working. Okay, so unfortunately, running a little bit behind on time, so I will leave Q&A for later. Okay, so imagine if you wanted to do this yourself. How would you do this? Okay, what you need is, first of all, personal backup of the game you're hacking. A personal backup of your legally purchased, legitimate copy of the game you're hacking.
Very legal.
In other words, the ROM. An accurate Game Boy Advance emulator with debug features. I highly, highly recommend MGBA. Simple, easy to use hex editor. We'll get to that in a second. I used hex XD with my hack. There is technically, there's better software out there, but this is simple and easy to use for our purposes. And you need a ROM patcher. You could use something like floating IPS. You'll also need something called DevKit Pro. We'll explain why we need DevKit Pro in a second. And this guy in online, let's say, reverse engineering communities with video games, Ipatix's tutorial on the work he did into Golden Sun's code. Awesome. Let's start hacking. So, if you look up at the screen, let me back out of PowerPoint. Right here we have this website, this forum post by Ipatix, where he discusses his work into reverse engineering Golden Sun's work and making games like the Pokemon games sound much better. Okay, so we're going to kind of speed run through this a bit since we're running out of time. So basically, if you want to learn more about how to do this, read this post. There are some other things that you might need to look up. Feel free to ask friends. Feel free to ask people in Discord servers. Feel free to ask forum posts. Let's get started on our hacking, shall we? Okay, so first things first. What I have saved on my computer is the better sound mixing code that comes from Golden Sun. Look at this. Boom. This is source code that, Ipatix, cleaned up a bit, and we're going to make it so that it will work with Mother 3. Perfect. So let me close out of these two things. Okay, so first things first, if you follow his tutorial, we need to set up this mixer to work with Mother 3. Okay, so we're going to copy this bit of text, and we're basically going to tell the mixer, if we decide to use this mixer with Mother 3, here are our settings, right? So, first things first. Let's open up Mother 3 in HexEdit. Let me look through my computer. Boom! This is the entire contents of Mother 3. If you scroll through this, you'll even see Mother 3's name here. And if you look over here, this is Nintendo's kind of like internal code, like their ID for the game, based on when it was released, what kind of game it is, so on and so forth, okay? But HexEdit is the software that basically is what you're using to hack the game. All of this data is Mother 3, and we're going to be tweaking it to put better audio mixing code into it. Okay, so let's copy this. So A3UJ is the game's code. Let's copy this, and we're going to put it into our mixer. Okay, so first and foremost, with better sound mixing, we need more memory. We need an extra scrap of paper for our math test. We need to ask our teacher, can I get an extra sheet of paper to do work on before I put my answer down on the test? That is basically what a buffer is. If you've ever heard of buffering on YouTube, it's just a place in memory to do extra work. Okay, so let's name our higher quality audio mixing buffer for Mother 3. We're going to use Mother 3's code, and we're going to...
Are you able to zoom in on that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Control number. Oh, it's asking for number pad. I see why. Oh man, I have to keep doing this.
Control number plus.
Or, oh, I can use my trackpad. There we go. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So, exactly. So, let's type in some numbers. What do these numbers mean? Well, basically, these are memory addresses. Memory addresses are essentially if you were to look at everything in the game, all of its data, all of its code, and you were kind of list it all out in order, right? And you were trying to look for something on that list. Then you would say, okay, how far into that list are we where, oh, this is where this character's art is in the game. Oh, it's at address 1000 something. Let's say, where's the audio mixing code? Oh, this is address 2000. It's just how far are we into the file, right? We're going to put our buffer into memory. We're going to put it into the small chip of memory that's really, really fast. We need that in order for the game to not lag with this better mixer, okay? So we're going to put it at the top of memory. I'll show you why in a second. Use game, well, this is where we choose which game we're using, we're adding our mixer to. Because if you check down here, you can set up a couple options for different games. So we're going to add options for Mother 3. So like if you wanted to reuse this code for multiple games, you can easily just swap out which game you're giving the mixer right here. Okay. Perfect. All right, so now this is where our buffer is going in memory. And now this is where that is. Allow pause, that should be 0. DMA fix, that should be 0, at least with Mother 3. It might be, throughout testing, this setting, again, if you read the tutorial, you'll check out, Ipotix explains these settings a bit more in detail. So you can, based on my testing of the hack I did for the game, you don't necessarily need to set this to 1, but if you ever encounter crashes with the game, you might want to flip that around and see how that's going. We're going to enable this setting, prevent clip, basically prevent the game from screeching at you if you add your own music to the game and it's too loud. Highly, highly recommended. Okay, awesome. Did I not put the game code? Let's see. Oh yeah, you're right. Thank you. Good catch. Perfect. Okay. Now, we have this mixer, right? And we're ready to put into Mother 3. All right. How do we do that? How do we take that code and turn it into, well, like game data? That's why we need GameKit Pro. GameKit Pro is basically a collection of tools to take code that you write for, say, if you want to make your own Game Boy Advance game, and turn that into almost like a game cartridge. Turn that into a game that you can actually play on the Game Boy Advance, right? So if you download and install it, it might be, say, in your C drive, just right at the top. For some reason, it's not put in program files. I don't know why. So if we go to DevKit Pro, we're looking for DevKit ARM. ARM is essentially what kind of processor that the Game Boy Advance uses, right? So we're going to go here, and we're going to look in a folder that's called bin. These are a bunch of the tools that we're going to use to take our mixer and get it working with Mother 3. And what you're essentially going to do, is, and turns out that Ipotix actually has instructions for this just somewhere else. If you look at Ipotix's GitHub, if you look in the section how to assemble, how to take that code and turn it into basically the ones and zeros that we're going to add to Mother 3's data, you're going to use these two commands with, if we get back to devkit arm, excuse me, you're going to go back here. You will use these two commands inside this folder to take the mixing code and turn it into something that looks like this. This is the better mixing code. And we're going to put that inside Mother 3. How do we do that? Well, just copy and paste in HexEdit. It's that simple. Now, we need to find a place in Mother 3 where we can put this mixer in the game without destroying the game's data, right? We need to find unused space or blank space. Mother 3 doesn't have a lot of blank space, unfortunately. So, here's a trick. How do you know, looking at all this mess, what parts of the game's cartridge it's using and what it's not? Well, let's read other people's research, right? Let's look at a little website called, there it is. Let's look at a website called Data Crystal. Look up ROM map for your favorite game. Control F, unused. Look at that. Right there, people have done some research and found parts of the game cartridge where that stuff is not being used. So we're going to find a place in the game's cartridge where there's enough space to add this new mixer. There is. Perfect. All right, so this address, 1B07A54. Arrangements for part of the credits. eToy's name spelled wrong. For some reason, all unused. Okay, perfect. So let's say we go to 1B07A54. And then right here is where that part of the game's cartridge is, just like Data Crystal was telling us, right? So here's what we're going to do. Let's just use a ROM address for just ease of understanding. Let's just use like an even one that ends in a 0. There's a reason behind this. We probably don't have enough time to get into why today, but Ipatix's tutorial on the Poke community forums explains why. So we're going to paste, and boom, you have just started hacking Mother 3's cartridge. How about that? That's the new mixer. It's in Mother 3's cartridge. Now, of course, we're going to save. And then, if you follow the rest of the tutorial, we're going to basically do this stuff to Mother 3's cartridge. So we're basically going to tell Mother 3, okay, where's this better mixing code? Where do we want to put it in memory? How much larger is the mixing code compared to the old mixing code? And how do we make room for it and everything? So after you do all that, you will get something along the lines of this. Keep in mind, this is the Japanese version of Mother 3. Think it will work on our first attempt? I guess not. I guess not. So, this stumped me for months and months on end. There is a part of Ipitix's code that is kind of like almost like a special feature. It's like an optimization. It's a speed up, but it causes problems with games like Mother 3. It took me a while to figure out how to properly use it, but if you are not sure how to use it, if you decide you're going to look up Ipitix's tutorial and mess around with your favorite Game Boy Advance game and hack it, go down to, not HQ buffer, it's going to be, go down here, go down to stack capacity right here, change this to 7FFF. When you do that, what you get is you get this. Let's try again. Will the game crash this time? It doesn't. How about that? So let's imagine trying to play the game a little bit, right? Because you want to make sure to test the game out. Make sure everything is in working order. Basically going through the naming screen. Everything seems pretty good so far. No problems. Oh. We're not quite there yet. So, turns out that Ipitix's tutorial works on Pokemon games, right? Now, Pokemon games on the Game Boy Advance, all of their recordings of the Pokemon cries are like extra parts of the audio code because they're actually compressed. They wanted to make sure, how many Pokemon are in Gen 3? 36? Imagine stuffing all of their individual cries into one cartridge. That's why Game Freak compressed them down, and they needed to add code to the mixer to decompress the Pokemon cries before playing them, right? Mother 3 doesn't have that. So Mother 3's mixing code is smaller. Why does that matter? Well, it turns out there's extra parts of SAPI. There's extra parts of the sound engine that Mother 3 uses. And this is where, if you load an original working game into memory, I'm going to try to fast forward. If you go to Tools, Game Save Views, let's see what's going on in the game's memory. This is really cool. Unfortunately, I don't think I can. But you are basically looking at everything inside of the Game Boy Advance's memory chips, the game's code and the game's data while you're playing the game in real time. Really cool, right? Here is the original audio mixer, and if you scroll down, you can actually see the audio being mixed in real time. Isn't that so cool? But we scroll back up and we notice there's something right under the audio mixer. There's something keeping track of the playback of our music in the game. So, through further finagling, if you move around some bits and pieces of Mother 3's audio engine in memory, and guess what you get? You get something. Get something. It's taking a while. Like this. So let's name our characters. Is the game working now? Let's see. For reference, when I was first working on this hack, this took like 10 tries to get working. Still fast forwarding. Let's see what happens. The game works perfect. How about that? Then, once you've done everything you need to do in order to get the game working, then you need to create a patch. You need to create a patch file, which is basically you sharing the changes you made to the game with someone else, where they don't have to make those changes manually like you had to. It does it automatically for them. Now, I did have to skip over some details today just because we were running short on time. If you look up Mother 3 HQ audio or HQ sound mixing on the internet, I go into more detail explaining all the work we had to do. But just like as a sample, you know, there are a couple steps. Step 1, you put the HQ sound mixing code into the game. Step 2, let's say you move Mother 3's, you move some bits and pieces of the sound engine to different places in memory to make room for the new mixing code, right? And you tell the game where it is. You tell the game where to put it in memory. And you can even mess around with the game's sample rate. Isn't that so cool? Software mixing can be cool sometimes. So yeah, that is pretty much it for me and Kuma. So we'll open the floor for questions. Yes.
So, whenever you opened Mother 3, what made it think it was running on the GBA, the GameCube player? Didn't show that or something?
Yeah, Mother 3 came out in 2006, so it would, at that point, the Game Boy player for like the GameCube was out, and they would Nintendo would advertise it, I guess, on some Game Boy Advance games. Because, hey, you could play Mother 3 on the GameCube. What other Game Boy Advance
The reason
games?
it shows the Game Boy Player logo is because it has Game Boy Player Advance features. In this case, I believe it has Rumble.
Oh, wait. Mother 3 has Rumble?
It's the same thing that it adds for like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. Yeah, it adds like Rumble. It has advanced features that the Game Boy Player can take advantage of. In this case, Rumble, because, hey, the game you can control it with Rumble.
I had no idea. You learn something new about your favorite game every single day. Thank you so much.
All right. Any other questions? You.
So I guess this talk was had a focus on the increasing the software quality. What about like the hardware quality, like for example, like noise from the CPU lines and stuff like that?
Oh, I mean, I suppose you could do that. And I guess that like brings up like a bit of like a almost philosophical conversation of like, okay, if you improve the audio, like the hardware in the Game Boy Advance, is it still a Game Boy Advance? Because like, you know, are games necessarily going to be compatible for it? Can you play these games in Game Boy Advance emulators? I mean, that's a great idea, but I certainly couldn't modify the hardware. I'm not an electrical engineer, but that would be so cool if someone could do that.
And I'm sure somebody can do it. I'm sure people have done it. But that's really more for like an individual person. If you want to share it throughout the rest of the community, there you go. But wonderful question.
This is a bit of a strange one, but
Okay.
one random GBA facts I know is there's the really bad Genesis port of Sonic 1 from 2006.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if this would fix that necessarily, but one of the more infamous attributes of that port is if you disable the music and sound effects, it frees up CPU cycles and you actually
It lags less.
would this be
Not
more efficient and potentially accelerate?
Yes, this code is a lot more efficient than like Nintendo's default code. I will show you. So this code only works for games that use Nintendo's default audio driver. People have created lists of games that use that default audio driver online. So you know what? Let's just for fun, let's check to see if which port, the Sonic 1 port. Let's see if it uses music. Let's see if it uses Music Player 2000.
It's the new game Sonic Genesis. Yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog.
Not finding it in this list, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily like we're totally out of luck. Let's see.
I'll be honest, it's not worth the effort.
Probably not worth the effort. Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis uses Music Player 2000. So you
Alright,
could
so you
make
can.
it. You could make a hack like we made for Mother 3 for Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis. Any other questions?
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming. We hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, guys.